My name is John McClelland, and I'm an insurance broker and tech entrepreneur. Um, we've done a little kind of around and found out, a bit about what people are doing, and it looks like we have, some people are kind of doing this as a part-time gig to supplement their income, and some people are planning for more substantial operations. Which is great to have a lot of diversity. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of different property and casualty, essentially business insurance coverages that businesses should have. I'm an insurance broker, and as an independent insurance broker, we don't work for any one insurer. We represent our customers' interests in the process, and we have access to a range of insurance companies. So we help people out with home insurance, car insurance, and business insurance. We're licensed in Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. About 2 years ago, I started a digital brokerage called MyBroker, and what our focus is on there is modernizing the insurance experience for digital natives, especially. But insurance is one of those old industries that's kind of in the dark ages, and that causes some problems for people, especially people doing part-time work. And we're really trying to address some of those problems for people and make it a bit more of a seamless experience. So today I'm going to be covering liability insurance, property insurance, some miscellaneous coverages like data, media, and legal expense. We're going to talk a little bit about cyber liability. I'm going to address COVID and some of what's going on in the industry there, and how that relates to coverages. And I'm also going to talk at the end about an insurance solution that we've built specifically for tutors. First up, we have liability coverage. So there's two main types of liability insurance that we're going to be talking about here. We have commercial general liability and tenants legal liability, which I'll refer to as CGL and TLL respectively. So CGL protects you if you're found legally liable for property damage or bodily injury. These could be incidents that occur on your premise, whether that's a home office or a space you're renting, or it could be offsite at a customer's premise. If you're working with students, perhaps in their home, for example. It could also be a rented venue, kind of like a co-working space, for example. One of the most common hazards that we see that leads to claims here are trips, slips, and falls. They are surprisingly common. It is very easy for someone just to trip over like a laptop cord or slip on some spilled water, and these injuries can add up to big costs if you're not covered. We work a lot with photographers. Photographers, you're seeing things like tripods and cords lead to a lot of losses. But for tutors and educators, there are some similar things going on. You've maybe got an easel set up, or there's bags, whether that's the students' knapsacks or your briefcase, and you're sometimes in tight working spaces that aren't ideal. So you're kind of sometimes having to walk over these things. It happens very quickly. Before COVID, I was a semi-pro attendee of weddings, just because I'm at that stage in my life where a lot of my friends and family are going through that. And I like talking to professionals that are out there about their insurance. So, I was just having a conversation with this photographer while he was set up running a photo booth, and over the course of the 5-minute conversation, 3 different people tripped over his flash cord. So it's surprisingly common. Fortunately, everyone was okay. It was a nice grassy field, and they were outside, but that could have been a concrete floor, or if they were in like a public library space or something like that instead, someone could have injured themselves, unfortunately. Every business and everyone who's being paid for their work should at a minimum carry CGL. We recommend $1 or $2 million, but $5 million is also common. Even if your customers are your friends, we sometimes hear, I only work with friends and family and they'd never sue me. But the reality is that once someone is injured, all bets are off. There's 2 important exclusions here I want to address. And one of them deals specifically with the type of work that tutors are doing. Something that's commonly excluded from, CGL is commercial general liability insurance. And abuse is often excluded from that. So what we're dealing with here are allegations of abuse, and actual abuse are commonly excluded from CGL policies. They can be added back in, but it can be especially challenging to place, and it can be expensive. So what we recommend is other options to mitigate the risks as best as possible. I know sometimes tutors are in a situation where they might be working one-on-one with a student, and there might not be other people around, but we encourage people as best as possible to try to minimize or avoid those situations. So sometimes that can be like working with another tutor as a partner, and maybe you're sharing space. It could be having a policy in place that the parents maybe are at home while you're doing the tutoring. Before COVID, this was much easier, but we'd have a lot of tutors that would be tutoring in like a public space, like a public library, for example, or sometimes even at the schools. And those are all measures that can help with these allegations of abuse. It's been very common as well in like minor sports with coaching. And I did some coaching when I was younger, and there were very strict policies around that you know, you're never in the change room with the kids by yourself. You'd always have like a buddy system, another adult with you to help cut down on that. Depending on your business model, you know, it might be challenging or possibly unavoidable. It is a coverage that we can get added back in. You know, babysitters are another class of business that have a big exposure to this, and we have been able to get them this coverage if it's something they absolutely need. Another important exclusion is that property you rent or is in your care, custody, and control is usually excluded from CGL. So there's another line of liability that we call tenant's legal liability, or TLL. So that covers damage to a premise that you're renting or occupying. It could be like a co-working space, a rented public space, like a room in a library, or a rented office. It's often required as part of the lease or rental agreement. Depending on what you're doing, you might see that you're required to carry a certain amount of tenant's legal liability. And I'm happy to talk more about those. You know, it's kind of a clear as mud situation, but when you hear people asking about liability, they're usually looking for either that CGL or TLL, and they usually want to see that you have a certificate for it. Next, we have property insurance. There's two main types of property we'll be discussing. We have like real property or real estate, and business contents. So real property being the physical buildings if you own them. Here's a picture of a public library from my neighborhood, the Gladstone Library. It's a nice old historical library with a more modern addition on there. You know, but it could be like a smaller home office, for example, if you own it. The main perils we're concerned with here are fire, theft, windstorm, and hail. You can also add in coverages for other things like flood and earthquake. But obviously, you know, if you do purchase an office or space of your own, or if you own your home and are using it as an office, they're very expensive assets, and it's important to make sure that they're properly covered for some of these perils. What's more relevant, I think, for the group here is probably business contents. So this can be called a lot of different things by insurance people, but we're talking, you know, generally about your stuff, your gear. So all the things that you use to run your business. So it might be like cameras or computers or desks, any sort of stock possibly if you have some. And it could include leasehold improvements as well, which are changes or alterations you've made to the space. Another term is sometimes contents of every description. So just on that leasehold improvements, you know, for example, if you do rent a space that you're going to set up as a purpose-built teaching space, the leasehold improvements might be things that you're putting in, like if you're installing fixtures, or if you're making changes to the layout of the room and putting in, you know, some permanent, say like reception areas, or different rooms or breakout rooms or something like that. Those are all leasehold improvements that would have to be, you own them, and they have to be insured kind of above and beyond what's in your lease insurance. Property insurance is usually subject to a deductible. Yeah, I've got a question here from Michael just about getting back to CGL, which I can address. But the average cost range for like a one-room commercial tutoring space, the most annual policies start kind of around like $700 or so for the year, and go up from there. And it can depend on many factors, so it's difficult to ballpark say. But for example, if you're doing more business than someone who's maybe just doing this a couple of nights a week, that would cause the cost of the insurance to increase because you have more people coming into the space. If it's an older building, it might be more expensive to insure. but yeah, if it's a small like space that's modern and say like 400 square feet or something like that, you're probably more in that minimal range of like around $1,000 for the year. Deductibles, I just wanted to talk about a little bit because everyone sees them on there on their policies, and sometimes it's unclear exactly what they're there for. A common deductible level we see is about $1,000. That's the amount of the claim that you agree to pay first. So it doesn't apply to liability. Usually we're talking more about contents and property. And it's used to kind of ensure that frivolous claims aren't put through, which helps keeps premiums low in the long run. So if someone steals your $1,000 laptop and you have a $1,000 deductible, you'd have to pay $1,000 to file the claim. So you're unlikely to pursue something like that. Now, if it's something different, let's say someone breaks in your car and steals your bag, and it's got your laptop and a projector and maybe some iPads in it or something worth $5,000. So in this scenario, you'd pay the first $1,000 and the insurance company would reimburse you for the remaining $4,000. And in a situation like that, it's probably something you'd want to claim. We're mainly concerned with fire and theft with this property coverage. It's important to be aware that it's not like a warranty plan if you're using a projector and that becomes damaged somehow or is dropped. Those are the types of things that are not covered. But if there's a fire in your garage and you lose all of your business materials for tutoring, that is something that can be covered. If it's stolen, like a smash and grab out of your car, those can be covered. If you leave your window open and it rains, soaking your whole home office, that's not covered because you should have had your window closed. Yeah, and theft out of cars is a big one. It can only just take a few seconds for someone to smash a window and grab something out of the car. Unfortunately, it's something we see happen quite often in the city. It's not uncommon to see people kind of casing cars if they see you loading expensive equipment in and out of a space or in and out of a client's property. They might kind of hang around and see if you leave something in the car that would be worth them grabbing. I'm going to move on to some miscellaneous coverages. So data and media are often excluded. However, some policies will cover the cost to recover data if the loss is caused by an insured peril. So if you have a hard drive, say, in your home office that's smoke damage from a fire, the data might be recoverable by an expert, and there could be money set aside there to do that. Another part of media coverage that tutors should consider is media liability and advertising injury. So if you're publicly posting, media liability coverage is a must. For example, here, this is a small group, and I think this falls under fair use anyways, but that picture that I'm posting of the hard drive is a specific brand of hard drive. And if Lacey decided that they did not like the way I was representing their hard drive, they could potentially sue me. So it's a good thing I have insurance for this type of thing. Another optional coverage is legal expense. So this can respond to a range of legal costs that CGL might not respond to. For example, it can protect you from criminal charges, contract disputes, a police investigation, occupational health and safety investigations, certain regulatory proceedings as well, like CASL and CRTC, CASL being the anti-spam legislation. A lot of people do get tripped up on that, especially around the minutia of gathering consent and what is consent for electronic communication and implied consent. So it can be a very nice additional coverage to have in there, especially if you're concerned about gaps in coverage on your CGL policy. Cyber liability is another optional coverage. It's a relatively new coverage, but it's becoming quite popular, and it addresses data and media as well. It can cover you for a range of cyber exposures like privacy breach and notification, which is now mandated by the government. So, for example, if you have a customer database, most people keep some sort of customer database, whether that's an Excel spreadsheet or they might be using something more complicated like HubSpot or Salesforce. If that gets breached by hackers, you're legally required now to investigate the breach, to find out what private information might have been compromised, and to contact your customers. And it can be an expensive process, especially for larger companies, and you can buy coverage for that. It can also cover legal and IT services. It can cover like a public relations type response. There's a lot of evidence out there that if something does happen, like one of these hacks that has potential for reputational harm, if you handle it well and you're communicating well with your customers and you're being proactive, it really can mitigate the long-term damage to your business. So there is money set aside there for like a PR coach to help you out with it. You can cover things like hacking and cyber extortion, which is ransomware. So a typical example is you turn on your computer one day and the computer's been locked down. You might find a message from hackers there demanding some sort of Bitcoin ransom. Most cyber liability policies include money set aside to pay a ransom to get your files back. And there's also IT coaches that'll work with you to make sure that you do get those files back. It also includes often data and media coverage. Around the privacy concerns, something that cyber covers that is worth just talking about a little bit and specific to tutors is it extends to privacy breaches from reproducing someone's likeness. So I had the more classic example before of a copyright, but someone's likeness is also a privacy concern. So something we've seen a lot since COVID started is people will post the like big Zoom photos from their meeting, or if they're doing like a coaching session or something like that. And depending, as long as you're making your participants aware that you're doing that, it's probably fine. It's even better to get their permission through some sort of participant contract or release. But if you're not getting their permission and you do something like that, someone could take issue with their privacy being compromised in that way. And there is coverage available under cyber liability coverage for that. What are the premiums starting at on cyber coverage? So it is quite affordable. On the annual policies, we see premiums anywhere from like $50 to $100, for example, for a basic cyber policy. And it can go up from there. It scales up quite a bit. Obviously, larger companies have a bigger exposure to it. Certain lines of work too, I don't think this would apply to tutors, but perhaps if you're working with an institution that's given you access to some of their network and private files, some hackers might use like a smaller vendor to get access to a larger upstream company. So in that situation, it'd be easier for a hacker to compromise an independent tutor or educator, and then perhaps get into some sort of an institution that might have something more appealing that they're looking for. In insurance, we deal with it. I'm an intermediary, obviously, but it would be easier for a hacker to get access to an insurance company through us than by attacking the insurance company directly. We're going to talk a bit about COVID. It's a rapidly evolving situation, but I kind of just want to give, I guess, a snapshot of what's going on out there, because if people always have questions about it in these sorts of presentations. So from a general liability standpoint, it's unlikely to be covered in the future. Many of the policies did specifically exclude like communicable diseases and things of that nature. And the ones that didn't specifically exclude it, they definitely are excluding it now. So many of them have adjusted their contracts to specifically exclude situations arising out of COVID. It's a very difficult thing. If you're talking about liability, it can be very difficult to prove because it's it's not really a physical thing. I mean, it is, but it's at kind of a microscopic level, right? Like, how can you prove that someone who's maybe a customer of yours, or if you went into a place of business, how can you prove that you were spreading COVID, especially with the long kind of 2-week, period that we're seeing there where people are susceptible to spread it. Something else that the provinces are working on is some sort of like good faith immunity. So I do think that's something we'll see. And the idea with that would be, you have to assume that people are acting with the best of intentions, even if they do unintentionally spread COVID. If they're taking precautions like social distancing and the mask wearing, and cleaning, hand hygiene, I think it's very unlikely that you would see someone be successful saying that a person caused damages by spreading COVID. Business interruption, I think tutors are able to do things remotely, but we have seen a lot of questions around business interruption. Insurers right now, at least, are taking the position that business interruption losses relating to COVID aren't covered. It's basically like a massive indiscriminate loss that our economy is facing. It's similar to a situation where there might be like a large scale riot or war, and those are also things that are excluded. It's huge. It's a huge amount of money if those losses were to be paid out. It's so much that it would essentially bankrupt the insurance industry. So insurers are saying that this is more a place for government to have a role if government can continue doing some of the things that they've been doing in terms of relief and trying to help out businesses and individuals. There are a few cases in front of the courts though, so I don't believe any of these class action suits have been certified yet, but there have been rumors that that some of these are going to go forward against some of the insurers. So we're going to kind of have to take a wait and see approach to see what the judges think about this and whether or not these business interruption losses should be paid out. And another question we get often relating to COVID is, you know, are you allowed to say like cancel or flat cancel your policy if something happens to your business relating to COVID or any other situation? Cancellations are difficult because there's usually a minimum retained premium that the insurer keeps to cover their costs. So there's costs involved with setting up the policy, with printing the paper, with having the underwriter review things. So you often can cancel your policy like midterm, not a problem. It's not like a prorated cancellation though, so they will keep a certain amount of that premium back. We find the best approach here with people, you know, especially people who are just researching, launching a business or getting into something, to just try to de-risk that decision as much as possible. Find an insurance broker early, talk to them, do your research, and then purchase it as close to when you need it as possible. And that way, hopefully you don't get into a situation where you've bought it 2 months ahead of time and then you have to cancel it because you're not able to launch the business the way you thought you were maybe. I want to talk a little bit about insurance solutions because there's a couple of different channels that insurance is purchased in and some different language around that. So consumers traditionally have two options for buying insurance. They can buy it from an agent or a direct or from a broker. And there's some key differences. So insurance agents work with specific insurers and they can only sell those products. So you're basically dealing with an employee of the insurer. For situations like this, you know, you can kind of think about the big banks, like the TDs of the world. Those are like agents or like direct insurance carriers. The other option is dealing with a broker, which is what I am. Brokers work with many insurers, so they can help you find coverage that isn't one size fits all. Most brokerages are independently owned, so that helps keep the advice impartial. We're not really captive to any one insurance company. We truly do want to work with our customers and make sure we find them the best insurance that they can afford for their budgets. I'm a little biased, obviously, but you know, I think when you're working with a broker, you've got the competition there of the different companies. They can move you around if a company is giving you a fair shake, and the impartial advice as well. Unfortunately, insurance is an old monolithic industry, and it's usually not a great buying experience. It's a bit like going to the dentist, a necessary pain. No one really wants to deal with their insurance. So I've been spending a lot of my time trying to fix that. My mission is to evolve the customer experience to make insurance fun. Okay, maybe not fun, but at the very least, something that compares well with a modern buying experience. The problem I keep seeing as a broker is that freelancers come to us after landing a gig and then their customers asking to see their insurance. So policies traditionally have to be annual policies that are paid in full upfront for business insurance, and it can take weeks to quote. As you can imagine, that's a big problem. A whole year of insurance, some people might only need it for one day or a few days. Paid up front, often that means the freelancer's losing money on their first job, and who has checks these days to pay for an insurance policy, right? Weeks to quote, they might need it for a job tomorrow. So there's got to be a better way, we started thinking. And there is a better way. So we recently launched MyControl, which provides on-demand insurance for tutors. It's an easy 3-step process. Step 1, you tell us about your business. As you can see, we insure on here photographers, videographers, dog walkers, pet sitters, music teachers, and tutors. Step 2, you select your coverages. So we offer CGL on there, the commercial general liability, tenants legal liability, TLL. We offer contents coverage. We also have the legal expense coverage and cyber coverage, conveniently all the ones I just talked about. And you can easily get a quote for a 1-day policy for consecutive days or for annual policies. And the one-day policies start as low as $15 a day. We're the first ones offering daily business insurance in Canada, and we think it's a much better solution for people that are kind of solopreneurs or gig-based, especially if you're just starting out. You know, you can book it for the days that you need it, and then transition over to an annual policy once that makes sense for your business. You can get a real-time quote and start coverage as early as tomorrow. You can pay with a credit card. You get your policies and certificates instantly by email. So you've got it, you know, in your email, on your phone. If you're going into a rented space or something like that, you can show them that you've got the liability coverage in place. And it's backed by a broker with real staff. Normally we're in this office in Toronto, and we also have an office in Brampton. Obviously now we're all working remotely, but we are real brokers based in Ontario, and you've got someone to call if you get into a situation or you have some advice that you need. So we're live on the iOS App Store and Google Play, and there's also, you can do it through the website. You don't need to have an app, and the website is mycontrol.ca. And you know, we can talk now, you know, if there's any questions, for example, but definitely people are free to reach out to me by phone or email if you have questions or feedback. Yeah, I know I went through a lot there, so let's open it up maybe to see if there's any questions. And everyone is quiet, which is either a good sign because I covered everything, or I put everyone to sleep and confused them all about insurance terms. Yeah, okay, so this is a good question from Kendra. Asking about another specialty type of insurance, which is errors and omissions insurance. That's abbreviated to E&O often. And that's an interesting question for tutors. It's not something I've come up against a ton, for example, with tutors. It is becoming a more common line of insurance for professionals. We do sell a lot of this for people like photographers, for example. And other professions like accountants, lawyers, and insurance brokers all have to have E&O coverage. And sorry, just to clarify for other people, so errors and omissions deals with losses. The CGL, if you remember when I was talking about CGL, it's covering like physical bodily injury to people or damage to a premise. But the E&O covers more like professional things that might happen. So if I give someone some really bad insurance advice and they end up in a situation where they've had a loss or damages because of that advice, they could come after me, and my CGL policy wouldn't respond to that. I do have an E&O policy that would respond to that. For an account, for example, if they give you some bad advice, you could sue them, and they would have E&O coverage in place to protect them from that. So for tutors, you know, I think the situation would be more along the lines of like a failure to perform. Someone would be basically alleging that you had caused damages by not doing your duty as an educator. It's possible you could have some clients asking to see that coverage in place. It's definitely some coverage we could, if it exists out there, we could get it for you. I think, you know, starting out as a tutor, just getting that general liability in place is important, especially if you're going into other people's spaces. That's a really good basic form of protection. And as you scale up, looking at other things like professional liability and errors and omissions, you know, is a nice kind of bonus to have. If you're hiring tutors within your tutoring business, what additional types of insurance would be required? So when you're purchasing insurance as a business, it covers your employees as well, and they can be covered as contractors, or if they're more direct employees. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question there, Michael. And yeah, and Kendra, I hope that kind of answers your E&O question. It's not something I've seen a lot of for tutors, to be honest. But if there's, you know, a specific story or situation you have there, I love learning, and it'd be interesting if that's something that's out there and people are asking to see it more often. Great. All right, yeah, I mean, E&O, a big one we see with E&O is tech professionals have a big exposure with that. It's covering all that indirect harm that you can cause to someone. So, you know, not I spilled a glass of water on someone's laptop, but I inadvertently made some sort of mistake when I was programming their website, and it caused them to crash and lose a lot of business. So Yeah, it's tricky to think of exposure that tutors would face for that, other than the failure to perform, perhaps. Repeat the answer to Michael's question. Yes, so when you're hiring employees, if they're an employee of your tutoring business, they're covered by your business insurance policy. So you don't have to buy separate insurance for each person. You have to, if your insurance company thinks that you're a sole proprietor, when your insurance comes up for renewal, it's good to let your broker know that you've hired a bunch of people and the nature of your business might have changed, but they're all covered by that policy. It's a question that we ask when we're setting up the insurance. Do you have employees? And if so, how many employees you have? And that's why we ask that question. And auto insurance, traveling to and from work. Yes, that's a good question, Andrew. So, if you're commuting to and from work, that's typically covered on your personal insurance policy, as long as your insurance company knows that you're commuting. But then using the auto policy for business use is sometimes not covered. So what you'd want to do is communicate to your broker that you are using it for business use. It's not necessarily expensive. It's more a matter of them knowing how you're using the car. If you tell them it's a pleasure use vehicle or a commute vehicle, and you're somewhere on the other side of the GTA in the middle of the day, they're going to have some questions about that. And we have seen situations where claims have been denied. You get it. I could see it certainly happening with tutors. But where you do see a lot of situations is with tradespeople and contractors as well. Often they're just using their personal vehicles, but not using them in ways that their insurance company knows about. So they're hauling around material or something like that. If they get rear-ended on the 401, the insurance adjuster is going to see, oh, there's all this carpet back here. What are you doing? And if they're using it for business use, the claim could be denied. If you're a tutor and you're driving around a lot during the day to different customers and clients, I think it'd be worth having a conversation with us or with your personal insurer to make sure they know that you're doing that. You can put like part business use on the vehicle, or you can say that you're using it kind of for consulting, for example, or something like that. And it's not necessarily very expensive. It's just about making sure you're communicating with that company that they know how you're using your vehicle. So we'll give a couple minutes in case there's anyone furiously typing a question, but hopefully I gave a little bit of an overview. I know we whipped through it, but that's a really good foundation of what business insurance is all about. And if anyone has specific questions or really wants to dig into things, please do. I encourage you to phone or email me. There's no expectation that you have to buy insurance from me if we're talking or I'm giving you advice. Especially, with tutors and with this app being a relatively new thing, I just like talking to people that are in these fields and identifying different situations. I think tutors have a unique exposure potentially with the abuse thing, for example, when they're in a one-on-one situation. There was an interesting question there about E&O coverage, and it helps me do my job better as if I can kind of talk to people and identify these situations that are out there. So I encourage people to please reach out to me. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. We're going to end it here then, and thank you so much, Michael, too, for helping promote this and bringing this great group of learning tutors together. And we'll be in touch soon.